This tutorial is for first-time kiln buyers. There are so many things to think about when you're buying a kiln. We'll go over some of the considerations. We'll talk about the electrical characteristics of kilns and how that might affect you. We certainly talk about the size of the chamber, the width and the height that you might need, the configurations that you might want to put on your kiln, the various options that are available. We'll have to include cost, of course, that's a major factor, and the digital controller or the mechanical controller, and what are the advantages and disadvantages of these. Then we'll show you some videos of 4 kilns from small to large, and at that time you should have a pretty good idea of what you want to buy in a kiln. So let's get started.
Overload, overload, overload.
So why should you be worried about overload? Well, we have both 120 volt and 240 volt kilns. Let's keep this conversation to the 110 volt kiln. Let's say you want to buy an SC2 Paragon kiln. It's rated at 110 volts and 12 amps. And you'd like to take it home and plug it into a receptacle and use it. What you must be aware of is that there are more than one receptacle onto that 15 amp breaker. How do you find out what receptacles are on the same breaker as the kiln? Here's the way to do that. Find a lamp, plug it into the place where you're going to have the kiln, and turn the lamp on. Go to the breaker box, and one at a time, turn the breakers off and on again until you find the breaker that has the lamp on it. With the lamp off, take and unplug the lamp and plug it into the other receptacles around the room. If the lamp stays off, then they are on the same breaker as the kiln will be. Now you have to be sure that whatever is plugged into those other receptacles doesn't draw more than 3 amps of current. Because the kiln takes 12, you only have 3 left, or you're going to throw that 15 amp breaker. So it's important that you do this and think about where you're going to put that kiln before you purchase it. Remember, add the total amps on all the equipment on all the receptacles on that breaker. Here's another possible problem. Some 110 volt kilns require 17, 18, 19 amps and a 20 amp breaker. Do you have a 20 amp breaker in your house? Not all houses have 20 amp breakers. So you need to go and check if you have a 20 amp breaker in the house and where that receptacle is located, if it's where you would like to have your kiln. If you don't have a 20 amp breaker, then you need to look next at the space and make sure there is space in the box to add another breaker. If so, you'll have to have an electrician add a 20 amp breaker to the box and put the receptacle where you'd like to plug your kiln in. If you do not have a space for the 20 amp breaker, that means the electrician will have to buy a panel box, wire it into the circuit, wire the breaker into that panel box, and the costs begin to go up quite a bit. So before you go buy that kiln, take a look at these electrical considerations, add up the costs before you buy the kiln so you know exactly what you're getting into. Next we'll talk about some 240 volt kiln problems.
Help! I'm getting a big kiln.
So you've decided to buy that larger kiln, have you? You probably will need help. You'll almost certainly need an electrician to come out and wire a new breaker for the 240 volt kiln and put a receptacle where you want to put the kiln. The exception to that might be if you happen to have a dryer plug that you can use when you're not using the dryer. The cost to do that is not much more than it would take to put in a breaker for 110 volt. And if you don't have the space, you're going to have to buy a panel again and have them wire both the panel as well as the circuit to the breaker. There's one other problem that might occur with a larger kiln. Let's assume, for example, that you might be buying a 240 volt kiln that has 35 amps. Now, the house's limit to how much it can draw outside on the post somewhere is the transformer. Most of them are rated around 100 amps or 150 amps. The 35 amps might be just too much for that transformer, which means you'd have to replace the transformer. Ask the electrician to evaluate that. If you have to have a bigger transformer, the power company would be glad to come out and do it. They get more money from the electricity. However, at the same time, they're going to charge you for doing that. So make sure you get all these costs together before you decide to actually purchase the kiln. This completes the electrical considerations. Next we'll talk about KILN size, KILN configurations, and some of those issues.